So hello everyone. So nice to see lots of old and new faces here today. My name is Kaisa Pankakoski, like John said. I finished my PhD at Ysgol Gymraeg last year, and I am now an associate researcher at the Language Policy and Planning Research Unit. I'm also writing a monograph for Multilingual Matters based on my research findings. So today's talk will be about half an hour, maybe 35 minutes. And the slides are going to be available from the school or myself after this. And the talk will be available on the Ysgol Gymraeg YouTube channel. So today I'm going to give you some key findings of my research. I really hope you will find this useful and interesting. I would love to hear some feedback as well, either straight after the talk or later on. So my Twitter or X handle is @KaisaPan. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And so feel free to share any photos or questions or comments on any socials, or you can contact me via email if we don't get a chance to talk after this. My contact details and links will also be on the final slide. So today I will first spend a few minutes to tell you a little bit about my research and my research methods. And then we'll take a look at language strategies that parents of multilingual children may use. And finally, I will talk about multilingual children's perceptions and family well-being. So we will start with the research methods and data collection. I took this picture while I was in the process of interviewing these two children. I think it showcases the interview situations with kids really well. I've got this other child here doing a backwards roly-poly, and the kids, they were building an upside down sofa den in their living room. So getting data from children, it was a really interesting challenge. I mean, it was a really fun challenge. It was important to interview the children, not just the parents, because children's attitudes are not always what the parents believe they are. Also, parents say what they say about language use in the family is not always the reality. Also, there's not a lot of research that uses children as data. Most of the multilingualism research is based on interviews with parents. So this is why I wanted to interview children as well. So first, a little bit of context. I am from Finland. Finland is an officially bilingual country. Finnish and Swedish are the official languages in Finland, but especially the capital city area, it's increasingly multilingual. It's very much a super diverse city, just like Cardiff. So my PhD was a qualitative study, but I'm going to give you some numbers about my research first to introduce the study and the methods that are used. So I investigated multilingual children in Helsinki and Cardiff, so in Finland and in Wales, my two home cities, my two home countries. And I recruited families with trilingual children, but it turned out quite a few of the children actually spoke more than just the 3 languages. So I interviewed family members from altogether 14 case study families. This was 7 families in Finland, let's go back, and 7 families in Wales. And all of the families had at least one child that was aged between 4 and 12 years old. So altogether, I collected data from 59 people within these families. So this was 59 people, 27 parents, 32 children within 14 families that took part in the study. So while I visited the family homes, I do have some data from grandparents and uncles and aunties that were visiting, but I did not include that in the main data. For the interviews, I used 6 languages to a certain extent. So before I visited the family homes, I asked the parents which language they and the kids would feel most comfortable being interviewed in, out of the ones that I speak to a certain extent. And I had picked families where the children spoke both official languages of the country, so Welsh and English in Wales, and Swedish and Finnish in Finland. And the kids also spoke at least one additional language on a regular basis. So this was not a school language, like an international language that you learn at school, but something that they used on daily or weekly. And the third language of the children, it could be anything from Arabic to Albanian. I had German-speaking families, French-speaking families, Mandarin Chinese, Hebrew, etc. So the families, they were super multilingual. Altogether, they spoke 24 different languages. This is the parents' languages and the children's languages combined. And to get more valid data, the parents filled in an online questionnaire before I went to visit the families. And I also recorded some family interactions during dinner time or board games or whatever the family was up to while I was not in the room. And I did this to see how the family languages actually work in the home environment. But my primary data was from interviews. I interviewed the children and the parents separately so that the parents would not have much of an impact on what the children said. And altogether, I ended up with 25.5 hours of audio recordings of interviews, and that took quite a while to transcribe. I also had secondary data, which was several pages of notes, data from questionnaires, video files, and photos, and that supported the audio file data. And finally, I used thematic analysis to analyze the data on NVivo. So I wanted to give you an example of these families. These are the boys of one of my case study families in Wales. You can also see a cat in this photo here. His name is Keddy. So this family's mum is Turkish, dad is a Welsh speaker, and the boys have acquired English from the community. They mainly speak it with the mum too, and they go to a Welsh medium school. So the mum told me that she had found transmitting Turkish really difficult in Cardiff because she didn't really know any other Turkish family. So she was sort of the only person teaching the children Turkish, and the children only really heard Turkish from their mum or when they went over to Turkey during the summer holidays for a couple of weeks. And the mum, she had been speaking Turkish to the boys on and off since they were born, but the boys just didn't really speak Turkish back to the mum. They were having a duolingual conversation. This is when people speak different languages to each other. So the boys were speaking English and the mum was speaking Turkish. This is quite common in multilingual families, or then they all just spoke English. But what I really loved was this strategy that the mum created. So Kedi is Turkish, and Kedi means cat. So when the boys were quite little, the mum switched from speaking English to Kedi the cat to speaking Turkish. And there was this dramatic change in the boys' behavior as they also started having these little mini conversations in Turkish with Kedi. So this is a lovely way of encouraging the children to actually speak the language and make language learning fun, bring heritage language into the home environment. I need to state at this point that actually every single family member out of the 14 families, the 59 people that I interviewed, they didn't mention the word difficult during the interviews at some point, especially foreign language transmission, like transmitting Turkish in Cardiff. It was found to be difficult. It was found to be challenging. It required hard work from the parents, but it also required hard work from the children. It was not at all straightforward for any of the 14 case study families. So I got in touch with the mum of these boys recently just to ask, can I tell the story of Keddy? Because I love that strategy so much. And can I use this photo? And she said yes. And Keddy is now nearly 18. And the boys still exclusively speak Turkish to him. And the boys kind of think, or they just got used to the idea that, okay, we speak English to mum, but we still speak Turkish to Keddy because Keddy doesn't understand English. So for the family, it was a working language strategy, just beautiful. So I'm going to tell you some more language strategies next. This photo here in the middle is of one of my case study families in Helsinki, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in a minute. So next, I'll give you the main language strategies that the parents of my 14 case study families said that they used. And most of these strategies, they were also confirmed during observations and children's interviews. And quite a few of the strategies have also been mentioned in previous studies. So I divided the family sort of parental language strategies into 3 types, which I called family language pattern, external language support, and resources and actions. And we're going to take a look at all of these separately. But first of all, we have the family language pattern. So family language pattern, it refers to which languages are spoken in the family, who speaks them, and when do they speak them. So there are different kinds of family language patterns. We have probably all heard about the OPOL, one parent, one language strategy. This is what some families do, but there are many, many other ways too. One of the case study families spoke the minority language at home. So both parents were of immigrant background, but minority language at home, this could even work if only one of the parents was a native speaker and the other had a really good knowledge of the language. Then we have the time and place strategy, which is a consistent way to increase language use in the family using a minority language in a certain setting or time, like in the mornings, or maybe with a pet, like the Turkish family's case. So I have a video here from one of my Finnish case study families. This was one of my more multilingual families. So it's a family that basically used the OPOL method. The parents speak English to each other, but not with the children. Mum speaks French with the children. Dad speaks Swedish. The children used Hebrew with some family members, but it was also the language of their religion. And they also learned it at school. And because they lived in Finland, the children were exposed to Finnish as well through some cousins and friends and school. So hopefully this video plays. Check how many languages you can spot. And please do give me a shout if it doesn't work. I'll go through that after anyway.
I can't hear anything.
Okay, thank you for saying that. I'll pause it. There we go. So in the video, we have the daughter and the dad. They are speaking Swedish to each other. The mum sits down and she says something about the dog in English to the dad. And then she turns to speak French to her son. I think she says something like, I hope somebody's going to fall. The dog is hoping something will fall on the floor for her. And then finally she says, istu, hyvä tyttö, maahan, in Finnish. Sit, good girl, down to the dog. They were looking after a friend's dog while I visited. So that kind of brought Finnish into their home environment as well. Yeah, I just love this video so much. It sort of shows the flexible language use in some of the families. So they were basically four languages within this for half a minute clip. So what the parents also discussed was external language support. And this was really, really important. So you have a family unit that you can control to a certain extent, or you can sort of control the languages used within the family. But there are some really strong sociolinguistic forces outside the family homes that will determine what happens in the children's ideologies and language development. So what parents needed to support the weaker languages were the extra people to increase the exposure to that language. So you remember the Turkish mum that I spoke about? She didn't really have that external language support, and she really struggled transmitting Turkish to her boys. So what can you do as a parent to increase language exposure? The parents I spoke to, they mentioned 4 things. First of all, you've got extended family language support. The parents included extended family as a strategy, and many relied on, for instance, minority language speaking grandparents' help in transmitting the languages. So basically, the children spent time with grandparents or other family members who spoke a certain language. So in this photo of one of my case study families in Helsinki, they have family members visiting a trilingual family, and that they said actually it's nice to see them, but it's also a strategy that really helps with the language exposure. Then local language groups were mentioned by lots of parents so that the kids could mix in a heritage language and develop their identities as multilingual speakers. So finding others who speak your language is super important. I myself set up the Finnish Saturday School in Cardiff nearly 14 years ago now, for this reason, because for me, it's super important that my children meet other people who speak Finnish and live locally, some people who might have a similar linguistic or cultural background to my kids. So my case study families, they attended church. There was a Hungarian church, there was a Welsh church. They attended community-based or weekend language classes. And the parents who did not find this language community network locally, they reported that they struggled with the language transmission more than those that had this local language group. Then we have childcare in a target language. That was used by nearly all of my families. One family had an au pair. This other one had a French exchange student who would visit the family home and speak French with the kids, or quite often they would just end up jumping on the trampoline with the kids, but it was still a monolingual French environment for the children. So hearing language from someone else in addition to a parent or carer definitely helps. And minority language schooling is a big one. So school language is obviously going to swing the language development one way or the other. In Finland, we have Swedish and Finnish medium schools, Wales, obviously, Welsh and English medium schools. So many parents sent their children to minority language schools. If the kids go to a Welsh medium school, they are very likely to become fluent in Welsh and use it in their everyday life. So in Helsinki, there are many other languages as well you can pick from when you think about children's schooling. You can go to Spanish medium or English medium or German medium education. And then finally, we will look at the resources and actions. So these could be things that the parents do, or maybe language resources that the parents provide or use. So regular visits to an area where a language is spoken is an important part of the family strategy. So language immersion visits. There are studies showing that with these visits, even passive language skills can be reactivated during even a really short, say, weekend visit, but longer visits are always recommended so that a child can properly get immersed in this language environment. Then we have language resources. So the parents use different kinds of language resources. This could be things like books or Netflix or games in the target language. So anything fun you can do with the children using your language. And then finally, we have different discourse strategies or reactions to a child's mixing. We all know that multilingual children, all the multilingual people, we mix languages to a certain extent or code switch, and that's perfectly normal. But sometimes a child speaks back another language to you, like the boys who spoke English to the Turkish mum, they were having the duolingual conversation. So basically, how do you respond when a child does not speak your language back to you? Now, this is important in terms of child well-being. And we as parents have to be considerate and we have to be careful because there were quite a few issues when we look at the well-being of these families and really strict language principles. So some of these discourse strategies, they could be the source of the problems and issues that compromise the well-being in these multilingual families. So the parents who estimated or said that they feel that children were really fluent in the given languages, they tended to use more restrictive parental discourse strategies, such as instruction to translate. So they would just tell the child to speak, "Raiditin siarad Cymraeg," you have to speak Welsh. Or minimal grasp, where the adult may pretend not to understand what the child says in another language. And then we have expressed guess, that is basically the adult asking the child in the target language what the child means. So now imagine you're the child and think what happens to the flow of conversation, or how do you feel if your language abilities are not quite developed enough to translate a sentence or translate a word, or you're really tired after school and you just want to explain in the school language to your parent what happened today. How do you feel if your parent pretends not to understand you? What if they demand that you have to speak another language? I'm going to leave that there. So I have a quote here from the mum of one of my case study families who also grew up bilingual. The parents of this family believe that to learn to speak properly and correctly, you mix as little as possible. The parents even called themselves the language police. So I'm going to read it in Finnish, is on the slide in English. So she said, erityisesti jos lapset puhuu sekakieltä. Moni painottaa sitä, ettei saisi ilmaista näitä virheitä, mitä lapsi tekee, koska se saattaa johtaa siihen, ettei hän halua enää kertoa. Mutta kun on itse kasvanut sen kanssa ja nähnyt, miten tehokkaasti on itse oppinut sen vieraan kielen siinä ohessa, niin pidän tiukkaan kiinni siitä ja uskallan korjata. Ei se ainakaan vielä ole tuottanut semmoista, että lapset ei uskalla sanoa jotain. So she used a really restrictive discourse strategy. She asked her children not to mix languages. And then we have the other side of the scale from the really restrictive discourse strategies. That would be the moving on strategy. So you just carry on with a conversation. You might carry on with the duolingual conversation, or code switching, where the parents change the language to the language the child speaks. So obviously this doesn't stop the flow of conversation, but does the child learn to speak that language if they don't speak it themselves ever? Are you going to learn a language if you don't have to make an effort? Okay, so those were the strategies that the parents used. And in the final part of my talk, I want to concentrate on the children's perceptions and family well-being. I did start talking about the well-being already. So I interviewed children and they talked about their experiences in a playhouse or in an upside down sofas, or sat on the floor in the playroom, whatever the children were most comfortable with. And for instance, one of these interviews with a 4-year-old, I was covered in stickers and their pet was covered in stickers, but I got this amazing set of beautiful, beautiful data. So these two children here are my kids when I first started my PhD, what seems like a very long time ago. So the children talked about so many different topics. What I found out was that children, they preferred certain languages over others, but there was actually no link to which language was their favorite. So it could be the community language, it could be the family language, it could be school language. Then they had really high awareness of parental language strategies that I discussed earlier. They knew exactly what parents had done to transmit different languages. They also had ideological motivations for learning or acquiring different languages, such as being able to speak to cousins or grandparents in a heritage language. But what I want to concentrate today is the well-being aspect. The children told me that there was some pressure in all of the families in terms of language proficiency. The parents, they set different levels of expectations on the children's different languages. So some parents were less tolerant of, for instance, mixing their primary, what were viewed as the main languages or the most important languages. But sometimes children felt that the parental expectations were just really too high, and this can have a negative impact on the child's well-being. And the children did express quite a few negative emotions like sadness and anger and anxiety because of their parents' strict language principles, like instructing the children to translate or speak a target language all the time. And I wanted to further show you the impact of parental discourse strategies on the family well-being with an extract from an interview with two children. They were aged 9 and 10. So we're coming back to the case study family from Finland, whose parents called themselves language police. They asked the children to speak only Swedish or only Finnish, depending on the parents. So the parents were, one was a Finnish speaker and the other one was a Swedish speaker. So I'm going to read it in Finnish. It's on English on the right-hand side of the slide. So first she said, mä vaan joskus vahingossa sanon ruotsia ja suomea samassa. Mitä äiti tai isä sanoo siihen? No ne sanoo, että mä en saa sekoittaa kieliä. Mä oon suunnilleen paras luokassa suomen kielessä. Se tulee just siitä, että mä en melkein yhtään sekoita ruotsia ja suomea. So the parents of this family felt that to learn to speak properly, you mix as little as possible. And they had strong opinions about mixing Swedish and Finnish. But this rule about mixing, it only applied to the two main languages, not what they called their bonus language, German, which they have learned because they lived in Germany for a few years. So the point I'm making is that every child and every family has different approaches for the languages. And you should adjust your expectations according to each family's circumstances and the child's abilities and context. And if the parents ask the child to only speak their weakest language, German, that they learned because of immigration, it could cause massive issues. And some children whose parents were really strict with a foreign or weak or heritage language, they did say that it was really stressful. The children, they were really aware of their limitations in terms of language fluency. I think all of the children reported they did not have good enough skills in at least one of their languages. So imagine a language you use daily, you feel like you don't speak very well. This is obviously going to impact your well-being. And the children did feel a range of emotions like shame, but then they also felt contentment regarding their language proficiency in different languages. But what I thought was super important, they were also able to show self-compassion. Many children said that their level of proficiency, it was just a result of their circumstances and it was just a result of the environment. So I have an extract from an interview with two children, and they were aged 9 and 12, that I interviewed in Swedish because they felt like they were more comfortable using Swedish than Finnish, which is interesting. I'm going to read it in Swedish. It's on the slide in both in English on the right-hand side again. So I said, svårast, finska. Varför? Vi har inte lärt oss så mycket. And I feel like this really shows how the children understood that they found Finnish more difficult because they had not yet learned it at school for a very long time. Other children in their class, they came from different backgrounds. Other children had perhaps a Finnish-speaking parent and they did not. So the other children had more opportunities to learn. I also want to talk a little bit about the parental experiences and parental well-being. Like I mentioned before, parents found multilingual language transmission challenging. And quite often parents had really high expectations of their children's language skills, especially initially. But usually the expectations were much higher than the reality of the outcomes of transmission, especially for the foreign heritage languages. And that was sometimes devastating for the parents. The children, they might not be able to communicate with extended family. They might not be able to function in the heritage country, in which case the relationship between a parent and a child may become tense. Communication could be difficult. So I have a few extracts here from different parents' interviews. One mother said, "You are swimming against the tide all the time with the kids. You're immersed in English and you are trying to get them to do something else than that's what's natural around you." So this is about the sociolinguistic forces that I talked about earlier. Then we have a Spanish-speaking mum who code switched halfway through the sentence. I'll read out what she said. It's in English on the right-hand side. So she said, "They can understand it well, but no quieren hablarlo. Les cuesta más hablarlo, pero mi hijo está hablando más porque conversa con su hermana." So the parents felt a range of negative emotions, and this included guilt, sadness. There was a lot of regret, especially those who had older children and who did not speak their languages according to the parents' expectations. So the parents may feel as if they failed when this child does not develop their language skills as expected. The parents may even feel anger because they might feel like the child is rejecting them by rejecting their language. But I want to finish on a happy note here. So the case study parents also had many positive emotions regarding the language transmission. These were pride, contentment, happiness, surprise, and love. And most parents said, okay, the children lacked skills in a language or two, but they were really proud of the children's linguistic achievements. They felt that the children's language development was remarkable. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And I have a final quote here. One of the families had a grandparent popping over when I did my home visit. So she spoke Finnish to me. It's on the slide in Finnish and in English on the right-hand side again. She was really proud of her grandchildren's language repertoire. She said, "Mun mielestä siis nämä kielethän on vaan rikkaus." She expressed pride and contentment in this comment, and this was something that all the family members had, despite all the negative emotions that were often connected with the act of transmission being hard work and difficult. So finally, I want to also mention that the children were really proud of their abilities. They were really proud of their multilingual identities. They were proud of their heritage. And all of them reported being content about being able to have at least an understanding of their languages. So despite all the hard work and the difficulty and the negative emotions and the perceived lacking language ability, pride was this underlying emotion. Language is an important part of their identity, and that important part of their identity, it motivated them to maintain or develop their language skills. So although they struggled with some languages, all of them also had really positive, beautiful emotions regarding their multilinguality. And I have an extract here in Spanish from two case study children. They were aged 4 and 8. I'll read it in Spanish. It's in English on the right-hand side again. So I said, "¿Estáis contentos con eso?" "Sí, yo también. A mí me hubiera gustado 4. 4, ¿qué más quieres hablar? Todos los idiomas del mundo." So these children, they were obviously really positive about different languages and multilinguality. I have 4 takeaway messages. First of all, transmitting multiple languages can be really hard work. Parents can use different types of strategies to transmit languages to the children. then I found that a language community, which were the local language groups or church or extended family, it was crucial to be able to transmit a language, like for this family in the photo, who had family members visiting while I was doing the observations. Then there was sufficient support to transmit the official languages of the country, so Welsh and English and Swedish and Finnish, because of the availability of schools and hobbies and childminders, community groups. Obviously, this depends on the area, but maintaining or developing a foreign language is obviously more challenging. So there is a strong link between the demographic strength of a language and how challenging it is going to be to transmit that language. And finally, some language strategies or really strict language principles negatively impact family well-being. And in the case of some families, they can lead to a significant change in the use of languages and the refusal of the child to speak that language. Right. Diolch fawr am wrando. Kiitos kaikille, kun kuuntelitte. Thank you for listening today. I would love to hear some questions, comments, feedback. I try to put on lots of little snippets of information in this talk. I would be really interested in your experiences too. A big thank you to my funders who made this study possible. Thank you to my 14 gorgeous case study families. You can contact me for references. I got my Twitter/X link and LinkedIn link here, email address. So you can contact me via those. I'm going to turn my camera back on for discussion.